All right. Let's see. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. These are extraordinary circumstances in light of our in search for better terms. So we, as you know, many of us were planning to be at the FLEPPC conference this week. But in light of that cancellation, we thought it would be great to go ahead and just still have an opportunity to touch base with folks and go ahead and have our call that normally wouldn't be scheduled because we would be at the conference. So I want to give a huge thank you to our presenters today for being so flexible and kind of on short notice being willing to provide their presentation. And then also, I did start a chat in the group chat. Feel free to share any potential updates from your organizations that you feel might be beneficial for people to know, any kind of operational changes or updates, anything that you just think you might want your partners to be aware of as far as how things are operating currently. We will talk a little bit more about that at the end of the call. So with that, as always, I'm going to go ahead and get into our main presentation for today. We have Alicia Halberter with UF-IFAS Nassau County and John Herbert with the North Florida Prescribed Burn Association. And he is also a chair of the North Central Florida CISMA. And there may be some other partners on the call. We're up to about 33 participants, and I'm sure we'll have some more join in the next few minutes. So there may be a few more folks on here today that have been a part of this effort. I was lucky enough to participate in the workshop that they did back in December on this project, which was really fantastic. And I was really happy I was able to participate in that just to get a better understanding of what they were doing and what this project was. So with that, I'm going to turn over some controls to our presenter. I just got to find her in this list of people. There you are. Okay, so Alicia, you should be able to take over, and thanks again for joining us today, and looking forward to hearing more about this.
Yes, ma'am. John, are you unmuted?
All right, should be now.
Okay, can you hear me? I hate to put it that way. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna start this off. Essentially, what I want to do, or what Alicia and I want to do, is share with you the North Central Florida CISMA's experience with a recent cooperative learn and burn event that incorporated the identification and control of invasive plants. So what do I mean when I say learn and burn? Well, in addition to being a member of, and I guess co-chair of, the North Central Florida CISMA, I've also recently joined the North Florida Prescribed Burn Association. And there are a lot of landowners in the state of Florida that use prescribed fire to manage their property. And in almost every case, at least in the burns that I've been involved in, there's an ecological component to the burn, an ecological reason for conducting a prescribed burn on their property. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that came into play here. But if we can, okay, let me just say one other thing. A couple of the most interesting aspects of this burn, to my way of thinking, is the fact of how this whole thing came to be kind of organically. And we'll talk about how the network of people's contacts worked and made this all happen. The second thing is that this event exposed a large number of private landowners to CISMAs and what we do in CISMAs, and it allowed us to reach an audience that we don't normally get to contact. Okay, so the slide we're looking at right now shows the 6 entities or partners that were involved. There was the landowner, the Glen St. Mary Nursery, Alachua Conservation Trust, and for those of you that are not familiar with Alachua Conservation Trust, it's a land management organization that ranges widely beyond the boundaries of Alachua County. I think they actually work up into southern Georgia. FWC Landowner Assistance Program, UF-IFAS, and the extension offices, the North Florida Prescribed Burn Association, and then the North Central Florida CISMA and the First Coast CISMA, which actually makes 7 entities involved. So how did this whole thing come to be? It's really a story of networking and folks having common interests between different organizations and getting together. I think of it as kind of an organic process. Okay, at least you go to the next slide if you would. So back to the network, there were several things that were all going on simultaneously. I believe it was in February of 2019 that I attended a workshop on prescribed fire for wildlife management in Quincey, Florida. As part of that workshop, the class was divided into groups, and each group was given an exercise, that being to design a prescribed burn program to enhance a particular pine stand for a particular game animal. And in our case, I think it was turkey, not that that really matters. And then we were going to present that burn plan to the assembled class and have it critiqued. So the facilitator for the group that I just happened to have been assigned to is Barry Coulette. And Barry is an employee of the Alachua Conservation Trust. He's got more than 25 years experience doing prescribed burns. And this photo is actually a photo of the stand that we were assigned to work in. Go to the next slide, Alicia, if you would. So during our field exercises, we observed Japanese climbing fern and coral ardesia in our stands, and across the fence line, there was just a thicket of coral ardesia. So I took the opportunity to promote CISMAs during the presentation. When we were given our presentation as one of the final things in the class, I talked for a couple of minutes about invasive species, how property owners might have invasives on their property, and how CISMAs might be able to help them manage that. So there are several people that came up after the class and asked me for my contact information. And I think Barry Coulette took note also. Anyway, shortly after that prescribed burn workshop, Barry Coulette met Tab Tabor. Tab Tabor is the owner of the Glen St. Mary Nursery. He met him at a Road Heavers Boys Ranch prescribed burn workshop that he was holding there. And they got to talking, and Barry realized that Tab has a lot of invasives on his nursery, doesn't know how to deal with them. Barry was trying to figure out how to help him. So Barry called me, and that's kind of how the North Central Florida CISMA got involved. Just as a little bit of background, anybody that's familiar with the George Tabor pink, absolutely gorgeous azalea, that originated at the Glen St. Mary Nursery. So historically at this nursery, they'd grown ornamentals in the ground. That was the practice back many years ago. They grew it in the ground and then put things either in burlap or in pots and shipped it off for sale. The ornamentals that they grew were azaleas, ardesia, bamboo, and they've got it all taken over the place. So Barry had read an article in the Cattleman's Magazine. Now this is all networking here. I read an article in the Cattleman's Magazine about Dr. Greg McDonald, who works at the UF Center for Aquatic Invasive Plants, then met Dr. McDonald while attending a workshop that was hosted by the North Central Florida CISMA and with Chris Demers and his forestry folks. Ginger Morgan with FWC connected Dr. McDonald and Barry through her Boy Scout networking contacts. More networking going on here. And finally, Alicia and Barry had met when Alicia helped him with a weed problem at his farm. So all of this is all networking going on, all contacts that have been made many in years previous that all came together to help solve a problem for Mr. Tabor. So if we kind of revisit the slide, I don't want to necessarily go back to that, Alicia, but the slide that listed the 6 contacts, Barry Coulette is wearing 2 hats, Alachua Conservation Trust and North Florida PBA. I'm wearing 2 hats, North Central Florida CISMA and the North Florida PBA. Laney Carter, who's a co-author of this paper, and Ginger Morgan wear 3 hats: North Central Florida's CISMA, the FWC Landowner Assistance Program, and the North Florida PBA. So I think it's kind of interesting that when I made the first trip out to the Glen St. Mary Nursery with Barry, he thought I was representing the PBA. I thought I was representing the CISMA. Fact is, it doesn't matter. Who was Laney representing? It doesn't matter. Also, if anybody's looking at a map, they'll notice that Glen St. Mary is not within the boundaries of the North Central Florida CISMA. To me, it doesn't matter. We had a problem that needed to be solved. We coordinated with First Coast CISMA and made it happen. They participated, but the point is that we all came together and helped contribute to making to help Mr. Tabor, help him get started solving his problem, and at the same time educating a lot of people as to the issue and how to solve them. So if we go to slide number 5, which is, the title is Planning, I call it the Gang of 3. We'll see on the left, we've got Barry Coulette, then we've got Dr. Stephen Enlow, who played an integral part in making this all happen, and then Tab Tabor, the landowners, on the right. I want to just, while we're talking about planning, I want to just mention briefly funding. The programs that funded this work were the Electrical Conservation Trust and the North Florida PBA. They're both 501c3 organizations, and they contributed funding. Dr. Enlow provided some material support, and we need to understand that continued funding is going to be important if we're going to continue to hold this type of work. And at that, I'll turn it over to Alicia.
Thanks, John. So, yeah, this is Alicia Halberter, and I am the Agricultural and Natural Resources Agent in Baker County. So Extension was an integral part of this program, essentially because for Dr. Enlow to get involved and write invasive species prescription controls, and for Greg McDonald to be involved, we have to justify, our work essentially and what we're doing, why we're doing it. So because the nursery location that the Learn and Burn happened on is in my county, and because me and Barry worked extensively together on a bunch of other projects, we were brought in so Extension could come in and be that contact for Dr. Enlow and Dr. McDonald. So what we did, and from the very beginning, was we isolated a block on the Glen St. Mary Nursery, which was approximately 2 acres. It was like 1.89 or something, of planted pines that had been planted, long ago before Tab Tabor had even taken over, and really just never been managed. And like John had mentioned, because it is a nursery, and many of our invasive species start out as ornamentals, it was just heavily infested with exotics. So we determined 4 exotics that were classified on the invasive species list as rather high categories, and were the most prevalent in the block, and decided to treat those. So those were Japanese climbing fern, Chinese tallow, coral ardesia, and camphor trees. We worked with Dr. Enlow and had him come out to the site to look at just the level of infestation that those plants were, and help us decide what herbicides we could use that would be the most cost effective, because the landowner was purchasing these on his own budget, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't just asking him to get 14 different herbicides to treat all these different methods and such. We wanted to make it cost effective for him, but also be the most effective control. And so we ended up with the Hack and Squirt using a 50% imazapyr solution. And we also did a 4% foliar application of glyphosate, and that was for the giant Japanese climbing fern. And we also used the foliar application on some of the smaller coral ardesias, and hit those with imazapyr as well, just to try and we know how difficult those can be to control. So Dr. Enlow wrote that prescription for us and actually had it like written out in verbiage on what we were to do. And then that work was completed by our entity partners. So some members of the Prescribed Burn Association, Extension, and the CISMAs and ACT came out as well in order to go ahead and walk through that site and treat all of the individual species. And we did that in like mid-October, I believe it was 14th or so, October of last year. And then the second step was to actually educate those landowners, the target audience that we were looking to get. And so we held a program that we called the Learn and Burn on December 11th of 2019. So that was almost exactly 8 weeks post invasive treatment. And we had kept up, the entity partners that did the invasive control had kept up over the weeks. I went out and sent out pictures, and we did a few kind of preemptive meetings out there to see how the invasive control was going, how the herbicides were acting, and to make sure we knew, what the control level was at by the time we were holding that educational program. We invited 2 key speakers. So that was Dr. David Moorhead, which was a contact that Barry Coulette had from previous dealings, who works in the university system in Georgia and has done a ton of control with invasive species and how that relates to fire. So the program itself with the Learn and Burn was not only just the invasive species control, but how that impacts fire management and what we're doing in prescribed fire when you have all of that now dead fuel, especially with Japanese climbing fern, where that fuel is up in the treetops and climbing up the trees and bringing that fire up higher. And so Dr. Moorhead talked a lot about invasive species control and how that relates to fire and his experience with that, his many, many years of experience with that. And then Dr. Stephen Enlow came in and with the University of Florida Extension and talked about particular methods of control. So he gave a presentation on some cut stump applications and basal bark, and actually walked attendees of the program to a site and cut down trees and taught them those. So that was a really great a demonstration that he did. And so in the morning session, we had Dr. Moorhead speak on that. We had Dr. Stephen Enlow give a presentation as well in the morning with our key speakers. And then we had some round robin activities. And so those round robin activities were a way to help or to involve all of our other entity partners, which included Extension. So we did an invasive species identification booth. The North Florida Prescribed Burn Association gave a presentation on their activities and the services that they provide, what they can do for the landowners that were in attendance. And we had some other, we had the FWC Landowner Assistance Program also gave a presentation, and CISMA was in that program as well to give us a talk, and that was where Emily Bell was an integral part. So those round robin activities were kind of just a way to show landowners all of the services that are available to them that relates to invasive species control and prescribed fire, and how those can be utilized as essentially a cost-free service for most of them. Then we had lunch, and then the afternoon session consisted of hands-on learning. So we had 3 different stations that were actually at the site that we treated the invasive species at. We took a little cart ride all the way down there from the meeting space at the nursery and walked through those 3 stations. We had split our attendees up into 3 different groups. One of the stations was to learn about foliar application and cut stump. And then another station was to learn about hack and squirt and basal barks. And then a few of our entity partners that actually did the invasive species control treatment in October led a walkthrough of the treatment site. So we kind of carved out a path through that and discussed with the landowners, here's where a tree didn't get enough hacks, and you can see, the effects of that, why that, why the symptoms are showing the way that they're showing. We discuss, the difficulties of that land never being managed before. So there was so much pine straw and fuel on the ground that the Japanese climbing fern was just climbing all through that. And there was no way you were ever going to get 100% control of that with a contact herbicide, and just all the issues and observations that we made through that site. And so that afternoon session was really beneficial to those landowners, because everybody doesn't learn from a PowerPoint, and that hands-on learning and allowing them to actually get in there, practice the herbicide treatment methods, and to actually see, the site that we had already treated and some lessons we had learned through there was really important. Then we carted everybody back to the meeting space and had our evaluations and allowed our expert panel discussion to happen. And so that included Dr. Moorhead, Dr. Enlow, and a few other key people that were just have a bunch of experience with treating invasives and prescribed fire. And that Q&A session was really beneficial. We actually ended up running pretty far over our planned agenda time, just because people had so much interest in the topic. So allowing those attendees to actually get one-on-one time with the speakers and the other attendees and get that advice was a really important part of the program. And then the most fun part of the Learn and Burn is the actual burn. So in our herbicide treatment prescription that Dr. Enlow had written, we were given permission to burn 90 days after the treatment. So weather conditions allowed us to burn 99 days after the treatment. We needed very specific conditions for this site because it is located within miles of I-10, some school zones, and a couple of houses, subdivisions and such. And so we needed, and a river as well runs through it. So we needed some really specific conditions, which luckily was pretty close to our prescription guidelines, which was 90 days. So our prescribed burn occurred on January 21st of this year. And those landowners and attendees that attended the Learn and Burn program in December were invited back to burn with us on that day and actually get some hands-on experience with prescribed burning methods, with actually, lighting the fires, why we do what we do, and to see visually how that fuel of all of those dead invasives in there from the herbicide treatment impacted the fire behavior, and how we manage that and the methods that we use. So they were given the chance to actually operate the drip torches. We started with backing fires, and then once we were comfortable with where the backing fire was headed and the pace that it was going, we ended up going in and lighting some heading fires using some grid and strip methods, just to be able to teach those landowners some different methods that they'd be able to use. This was a really important part where the Prescribed Burn Association came in, and ACT as well was able to bring their rigs. So we were super safe. We had all of the proper PPE, and the fire lines luckily are already set on this block using roads. So we had water available and everything. We were able to just show landowners exactly what needs to go on before you start to burn, and what needs to happen during the burn as well. So the whole point of this presentation is not necessarily that we held this really great program. It was the unique approach of how we got to put on this program. So being an extension, I'm used to holding programs with multiple partners involved, but to have so many agencies involved was really unique, and that provided a lot of opportunities for us to combine our efforts and our knowledge and our resources, but also our audiences. And so my extension, contacts are pretty much solely in Baker County. Barry operates a much larger region with the Alachua Conservation Trust. Lainey Carter and Ginger Morgan with FWC have a ton of contacts with landowner groups through the counties that they operate in. And so being able to reach out to those many people and CISMA lists gave us the opportunity to teach much broader audience than we ever would have, and get people involved where they necessarily wouldn't be involved. CISMAs they do a whole lot with invasive species control and don't do a whole lot with prescribed burning. And so it gave those folks an opportunity to learn something that they may never have been interested in before or been presented on in the past. So that was a great opportunity for us to combine those efforts. So we combined some physical resources. So the venue and the herbicides was supplied by the landowner, since we were treating at their site, and we're basically offering this free service for them to treat the 2 acres block and teach some of their staff how to do that as well, so they could continue on with those treatments in other blocks. The herbicide equipment, so a bunch of our sprayers, our hatchets, all of that for the actual control day were loaned by ACT. And that was a really integral part as well. We don't all have access to tons and tons of backpack sprayers and hatchets and such to be able to get all these entities partners together and get out there and work together. And that saved us a lot of time and manual labor. Those entity partners, donated their time and their labor into actually going out there and treating, to holding the educational program and coming back to burn. So that was really important, just having all of those hands on deck. To be able to manage, people that are there, especially at a time when fire's burning and stuff. We want to make sure that we have knowledgeable people on hand, that we're not putting anyone in a position that they're not comfortable with, or we want to reduce our liability as much as possible in those instances. Our program implementation materials were provided by Extension, so we have the ability to print out all of those packets. We hold tons and tons of programs, so program planning is a breeze for us. And nobody else had to take on that responsibility, especially because we were right there next to the venue that we held the program at. So we were able to supply, chairs and tables and projectors, screens, all of that with relative ease. And then, of course, our funding was provided by ACT for lunch and any equipment or anything else that we needed specifically for this program. But then also the content and the knowledge resources were really important. So having Barry to be there and give his extensive experience with prescribed fire, and Dr. Moorhead with his extensive experience with the management of invasives and fire, and then Dr. Enlow just knows everything about everything. And so he was great to have on there as well. And being able to have those contacts, they never would have been involved had all of those agency partners not been involved. We would have never known who Dr. Moorhead was it not for Barry. And that also gave those previous experience from our FWC partners. Lainey Carter, in her life before FWC, was actually a contract sprayer, and so had tons of education in regards to the treatment methods, and was able to help us all learn the best methods to walk through the site and treat. She was a really integral part of that. And then our NFPBA and ACT representatives provided us a lot of training on the prescribed burning methods that we were going to use before we actually went out there and were in front of the landowners. So that was really important. And so the program was a huge success. We had a lot of impact. So just from the survey from the day of on that Learn and Burn in December, we saw that 100% of attendees indicated that they increased their understanding of the importance of invasive species control. They became more comfortable with identifying the 4 invasive species that were presented. We also had a bunch of other invasive species that were present on the property that we brought to identify as well, but the 4 specific ones they were really comfortable with. 100% indicated that they were aware of the available land management programs. So that was a really important part of this program, was just showing landowners everything that's out there and available to them for them to utilize. And 97% of them indicated that they now knew how to safely and effectively mix chemicals, as well as apply those herbicide treatments themselves, which, giving people that ability to go out there and do that on their own land is a really important part of this, because even though those resources are available to them, we can't stretch them to the max. So giving those landowners the ability to perform these activities on their own land was probably the most important part, and extends our reach a whole lot further. As far as the burn part of that, 97% of them indicated that they would control invasive species on their properties, particularly before any prescribed burn methods were applied, and 100% indicated that they would utilize the land management programs available to them. And then we did a follow-up at the beginning of this year after our burn, just a few weeks before we were supposed to give this presentation at the FLEPPC conference. We emailed all of those attendees of the program a survey and asked them to complete that. So 80% of those survey respondents identified invasive species on their property after attending the program. So they actually went out and looked on their property and found invasive species where they were, and 50% of them had already begun to control those invasives. So this survey was sent out 90 days after the program. So just shortly after that December program, people were already going out there and making moves to control invasives on their property. And 40% of them intended to control either more invasives or the invasives that they did have at the appropriate control time, which we know is really important. You can't control invasives 365 days a year, that we have to get them in their particular growing periods. So that was good to know that they were already doing it or had plans to do it. 45% of those respondents had burned already in the 2020 burn season. And they indicated that they had burned about 877 acres. So, and 67% of those said that invasives were present in the blocks that they had already burned. And we had them indicate what invasive species they identified on those blocks that they had burned, and they did include species that we had discussed in the Learn and Burn program. So you can see we're already having a direct impact on those landowners and the lands that they're managing. We gave them a quiz to see if they really could identify the invasive species that were present in the block that we treated at the Glen St. Mary Nursery. And respondents were able to correctly identify. So 57% of them identified coral ardesia, 75% identified Japanese climbing fern, and those other 25% on the Japanese climbing fern called it old world climbing fern. So they at least know generally the plant that they're looking at. 100% were able to identify Chinese tallow, and only 50% were able to identify camphor trees. But in their defense, it was a really difficult picture. It was pretty far away, and we only had some small descriptive factors on them for them. If they were actually looking at the plant, I'm confident they were probably able to identify it a little better. So, and then I asked them whether they had actually gone and utilized the land management programs that were discussed in the Learn and Burn program. 5 of them had said they had already contacted the Landowner Assistance Program through FWC. 1 had gone and contacted their local cooperative invasive species management area. 8 had utilized the Prescribed Burn Association. 4 were utilizing Lateral Conservation Trust. 4 had reached out to their extension services, which led to a total of 22 educational opportunities. So I think we had about 30 or so people, not counting other agency partners, attend that Learn and Burn program in December. And so the fact that 22 educational opportunities already arose from that is pretty great. So that's all I have, Emily. I'm not sure if John has any final comments he wants to add to that. And if not, we are welcome to open it up to questions.
I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, great. Thank you both so much. That's a really, really cool presentation. So a few things, I'll start out. If people do have any questions, feel free to either unmute yourself and chime in, or add the question in the chat box, and we can address it that way. So I have a few things. First of all, I believe that when I introduced Alicia, I said she was with Nassau County Extension, so I wanted to make sure I corrected that and say she is with Baker County Extension, and I think she mentioned that as well, but I just wanted to make sure that I corrected that point. And also, I think I'll just add to the conversation about the workshop. I thought the agenda was really well thought out and interesting in the way they did the round robin exercises. So for example, in the morning, as Alicia mentioned, they had the different, they had IFAS Extension do the plant ID quiz. They had me and Lainey Carter were together for the land management organizations, and then they had the other presentation. So they had all three going on at the same time, and the folks cycled through in their three groups. And what I thought was cool about that was that it allowed a large group of people to break into smaller groups to interact with these different partners. And you know, I think we did about 15 minutes, and so the way Lainey and I broke it up was I talked for 5 minutes about FLEPPC and CISMA. She talked for 5 minutes about FWC private land management, our private land partnership program, and then we were able to kind of talk to the folks for a minute before they moved on. And so I think what I'll do, just kind of a rambling way to say, I think it was a really great program, a really effective program in the way they laid it out. And then especially in the afternoon as well, that they did get folks out there, split them into smaller groups and have them get some hands-on training with the experts. So I thought that was really neat. I think what I'll do when we post this call online is I will also post the agenda underneath it. So if you go to our page where the calls are posted, for some of the calls you'll see that there's some quick links underneath them. So I think for this one, I'll post that agenda just so folks can go back and revisit how that was set up, because I think it was really neat. And then Alicia, I was just curious, when you guys did the burn, how many of the participants from the workshop day came out for the burn? Did you have just about almost everybody come back out?
No, we only had a handful. And so I think a lot of that was related to, we literally only give them 24 hours notice. Because especially for this property, the weather conditions have to be so specific, and we have to get our burn prescription approved. And it was a holiday weekend. So we burned, I believe, on like Tuesday or Wednesday. And that Monday was a holiday. So I think a lot of people were, we burned on Tuesday, and Monday the 20th was a holiday. So I think a lot of people were traveling and, you know, either got the notice late and or just, you know, a lot of people aren't able to just stop what they're doing and come on 24 hours notice. So I think we had probably 4 or 5 landowners, but all in all, we had about 20 people there for the burn. So that included agency partners. A couple of TABS employees came and came to learn as well from the nursery, and then a handful of landowners.
Awesome. Yeah, and that makes sense with burning, because it is, you never know exactly what day it's going to go down. So, okay, great. Are there any other questions at this time? Again, you can always reach out to the folks involved in the project. I'm available to connect you if needed. So if there's no other questions, we will go ahead and give you a few updates. But again, just huge shout out to Alicia and John for your flexibility and you know, joining us today to kind of fill this time that we're all just trying to figure out you know, how to redo our schedules and everything. So really appreciate it, and that was just a really great presentation on a really cool project. And I believe that the Alachua Conservation Trust and the PBA, the North Florida Prescribed Burn Association, are working on a few other similar projects. So hopefully we'll hear a little more about that down the line as well.
This is John. I would just add one thing, and that is hopefully we'll be able to give this presentation at a FLEPPC conference. And when we do that, we'll, I'm sure, have photos of the unit that we burned, that we treated and burned, so we can see kind of what the end result was.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, John. Yeah, so from that, I just kind of wanted to provide a few updates. Okay, so we did get a question, will this program be available in other parts of Florida? So John, you may have some insight into that. I believe there was a project in, I want to say maybe Marion County. But I think if you wanted to do a program similar, you know, getting in touch with the partners involved and seeing who in your area could participate would be the way to go about that. But John, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're exactly right. Probably the main person to get in touch with would be Barry. Now I know that I think he does in fact have a similar type of activity, or was hoping to have a similar type of activity going on down in Marion County. A lot. I don't recall exactly what the boundaries of the Alachua Conservation Trust are, but it's a large part of the state. But even if the entities that pulled this off here couldn't help somebody else in a particular part of the state, I'm sure that we could help those folks cobble something similar together with whatever resources are available in whatever part of the state we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have a great model, and Alicia and John and Barry were so good about, you know, kind of documenting the whole process. So it'd be really, I think, relatively easy to kind of share how they pulled it together, kind of like they did today. So definitely a great model that can be used in other areas. So as we all know, because we would be there today, the FLEPPC conference, and that includes the CISMA annual workshop, have been canceled. I just wanted to point these two things out that we had sent to you guys via email, that it may take up to 2 weeks for those registration refunds to be processed. And then I think this is really important to note because, you know, as I mentioned, we're all just trying to figure out how to kind of manage, and a lot of our day-to-day work life has kind of changed. So it's important to remember that when we register for the FLEPPC conference, that usually covers our membership to FLEPPC. So the funds for the conference itself and for the grants and things like that from FLEPPC, you know, are part of that membership. And so because the conference was canceled and your registration is going to be refunded, you know, please consider actually renewing your registration at the FLEPPC website, because usually it's just, we don't have to think about it because it happens automatically. And so it's just one of those things. Just wanted to make sure that I kind of got that message out there and folks were aware to please go and look at the membership options and renew in light of the conference being canceled. If you have any other questions related to that, I know that they're working on some other possibilities for sharing some of the information, and so that would come from Dia Lawrence and Jimmy Lang and that crew. But they've done a great job, kind of just, you know, they had to make a tough call, and they've done a great job making sure everything got kind of wrapped up with that. So in addition, pretty much all in-person group events are currently canceled or postponed. So I took everything off the CISMA calendar. We're definitely encouraging everybody to follow all the guidelines that are being recommended. You know, absolutely no say pressure, or, you know, don't feel like y'all need to be getting workshops and things like that together. Obviously, we're not recommending that at this time. So, you know, a lot of stuff has been canceled or postponed. I did want to note one of the dates that for one of the big events that I know actually did get a new date. The UF IFAS Aquatic Weed Control Short Course, which was originally scheduled for May 4th through 7th, has been rescheduled for October 27th through 30th. So you can go to their website and get the information about that. If you guys know of any other big programs or any of your stuff that got rescheduled or canceled, or that you need to get the information out, we can use the CISMA listserv for that purpose. So if you want to shoot me an email, or if you want to email the CISMA listserv as things change, that's good too. Dexter noted that the North Central Florida has CISMA has a monthly call every third Wednesday for folks that are interested, and that is on our website on the calendar, so you can get the details of that, as well as the CISMA calls, anything that's going on via webinar. And that's another point, if you are transitioning some of your programming to an online opportunity, please let me know, or shoot the CISMA network a listserv, and I'll make sure that those do get up on the calendar. So we do have a sense of what's going on online at this time. So here we have, you know, the monthly CISMA calls. We're going to still have those. So that's the fourth Wednesday of every month. I sent out an email last week to the CISMA listserv about the NASMA webinars. So they do a really good program on the third Wednesday of every month, and you can find the details on their website. And so again, any others, if you have any programming that's transitioning to online and you'd like to get the word out, you know, again, please let me know, and feel free to send that information out via the CISMA listserv. So our next CISMA call on Wednesday, April 28th, I think this is really timely, this social media boot camp. Shelby is with the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants at the University of Florida, IFAS, and she's just gonna kind of provide us with some tips and an overview of kind of how to use these tools effectively. And so even more so now when we are kind of having to go to all these different resources to get our word out, I think this will be a great opportunity to learn more about that. I know I'm looking forward to it as well. Oh, wrong way. So with that, again, here's my information if you have any questions or if I can help spread the word. Also, I do have access to the Zoom that we use for this. If you have any questions or I can help you in any way with transitioning programs online, let me know. I'm happy to help as I can with anything like that. So again, with that, I just want to thank our presenters. I want to thank everybody who joined in today. We really are, Sam and Sherry and I talked on Monday, and I guess the other thing I'll add is that we are kind of taking it week by week at this point. So we're not, you know, we're kind of just going to see where things go and what happens as far as planning, and we'll be, you know, back in touch with folks as things start to recover and come back to programming. So we you know, we know that everybody's schedules are changing, and the situation is changing rapidly, and a lot of things are up in the air. So just again, really appreciate everybody, and you guys are all in our thoughts, and hope everyone is you know, being safe out there and doing what you can. So thank you so much. And a shout out to Brian Pelk, who just made a comment in the group chat that said he paid his annual FLEPPC membership, and so should we all. So it's that reminder to all of us to continue supporting those groups that are, you know, that as a result of these changes are gonna take a hit, or that operations don't continue as normal. So thanks, Dexter, he did his too. So, all right, everybody. Well, with that, I mean, I apologize for kind of the ramble. We're just trying to keep moving forward and keep doing the important work that we do. So thank you again, and look forward to talking to you next month. Bye.
Thank you.